Pack of Wild Animals. This is a story I've been working on for quite a while. This one's about 5,700 words long, not 6,000. And we're just going to give this one an edit. So we're going to read through and see what we can make of this one. So this is Like a Pack of Wild Animals. That was quite a little ditty indeed. Thank you so much. Things didn't work out as well for that Jack and Diane. Of course, to be fair, with Mellencamp's version of it, we didn't really hear what happened afterwards. So if you follow it out long enough, maybe their story turned a little dark too. I think things worked out fine for them though. All right, like a Pack of Wild Animals by Jay Wilburn. Dallas Fields was the second fastest of their friend group of 5 that summer between 6th and 7th grade. But the day the wolves came for him, he ran faster than Geordie Keller had ever seen. That gray wolf stayed right on the boy's ass all the way through the woods toward their treehouse that might as well have been on another continent. The other 4 boys leaned out on the high open window cut into the plywood wall as they yelled for Dallas to hurry. It wasn't like the boy planned to slow down with that animal hot on his heels. Ricky Burton was the one who said what the other 3 were thinking. He's not going to make it. The boy said it with such flat, emotionless certainty that it seemed like a foregone conclusion. Ricky's hair was dyed blue that summer with blonde highlights. His dad hated it, and the other boys made fun of him for it, although deep down they thought it was cool. By that late July day when Dallas ran from the gray wolf, Ricky's hair had faded to a denim blue with white highlights. Ricky was always drawing on himself. That afternoon he had fake rings with intricate designs drawn in black around his fingers. If the day had gone differently, then he might have drawn full gloves and other fake jewelry around his hands and arms too before it was over. His father hated that too. Geordie focused on the wormy dragon Ricky had drawn around his left bicep. It had long dripping fangs like the wolves. He'll get here, Emery Carlson said. He has to. Emery had dark hair with really bushy eyebrows, like his father. Emery Carlson's dad's name really was Carl Carlson. He sold shitty used cars down by the highway on the far side of the woods where they had their treehouse. Geordie's dad was the one that called the cars shitty. Geordie, here, let me fix a typo there. That's what editing's for, right? Is to fix all those before anybody sees them. So that's just between you and me. Geordie would never repeat such a thing to his friend. Throw in a missing word there, because what this story needs is more words. Geordie sure as hell would have rather been over there as opposed to up the tree above those wolves, anywhere but in that woods at that moment. Clyde Austin, their fastest friend, they all agreed. I need to put that in because I made Dallas the second fastest. Said even if he does make it this far, the other wolves are still here. Clyde had long stringy hair that always seemed greasy even after he showered. He was the first of them to start growing the hints of a mustache. He stunk from under his arms too, no matter how much he claimed to shower. His voice was deep and didn't break quite as much as it used to back in school or in early June. It gave his dire pronouncement of Dallas's fate a much heavier weight. Geordie protested. No, they're gone. They wandered off when they realized they couldn't get us. He'll be fine. They're not gone, Ricky said. They just circled out into the bushes off the trail. We still heard them rustling around before Dallas started yelling. That's why we stayed up here. Clyde is right. He's doomed. All right, Lindsay says, I know editing is supposed to be about cutting words, but I often end up adding them. Maybe I'll get the hang of it one day. I think sometimes, I think it's filling out the story is good because there is some missing pieces. You know, you get a rough draft down, and there's a lot that needs to be filled out. But I do think like the really great writers, like the ones that just really nail it, are the ones that are willing to cut out those extra paragraphs that don't really add anything to the story. And especially when you get to like novel and novella length works, I think they're the ones that by being a little harsher on themselves, they're the ones that that really tighten up a story. I'm just not that guy, and I think, writing on stream and stuff, and like not really having anyone to answer to, it kind of lets me be a little self-indulgent. But there are probably paragraphs that can be cut. And again, sometimes I get that when I'm editing off screen, so I'll come back to the story and do some more editing and might pull some things out. But I don't tend to. I tend to be the guy that's adding words, unfortunately. Emery looked back and forth to the other boys. Should we call for him to go the other way then? What other way? Geordie asked. His wolf is right behind him. Where else can he go besides up here? Geordie said his wolf instead of the wolf. It came from a dark idea that had not been fully realized inside his head yet in the midst of all this terror. 5 boys, 5 wolves. There we go. Hurry, Dallas, Emery yelled. Hurry, dude. The others joined in on the calls, even with the prevailing attitude toward his chances of survival. Dallas actually started to pull ahead. The gray wolf acted like it was losing interest. Its full-out run turned into more of a bounding, with its long tongue lolling out of one side of its mouth. It turned its great head to the side. Geordie had a weird moment where he thought about kids at school who fell behind in races and then pretended they were hurt. Pretended like they were hurt to save face. Say everyone knew they were faking because they were embarrassed of losing. Maybe wolves pretended they weren't that hungry anyway whenever they got tired from a chase. He and Dallas would take any break they could get. Geordie actually started to wonder if the wolves were just toying with them. Maybe they really were just big dogs after all, instead of a pack out here in the pocket of woods between all the highways and developments. Maybe they could walk right out of here if they did so confidently. Even Clyde and Ricky started beating on the wall of the treehouse below the window like they believed he had a chance. Then the other 4 wolves emerged from the bushes on both sides, as if the boys above had been calling them forth. Emery continued to yell for Dallas to keep coming even after the other 3 got quiet on both sides. He's giving up, man. You got this. Just get to the ladder. They all got quiet then. Dallas drew close enough for them to hear the wheeze of his breathing. Sweat glistened in his short crew cut. His dirty white t-shirt was discolored with darker sweat. The 4 wolves fanned out in front of him, and the gray wolf took its time, stalking him from behind. It looked like it had regained its appetite again. The other wolves were white, black, bushy brown, and then the last one was as red as a fox. They could just be dogs, Geordie thought with no real conviction. Dallas turned back and forth, flinging droplets of sweat. He looked up into the faces of his friends behind and above the pack that had him surrounded. They were so damn close, but helpless to help him. The low rumble of growls raised all around. Geordie had a wild idea. What if Dallas just walked quietly between them and climbed up the hammered slats of their ladder, kind of like a sneak play in Pee-wee football? By the time the wolves realized what he was doing, Dallas would be up and safe with them. But then what? What was the escape plan from the treehouse? First things first, he supposed. Geordie never got around to voicing his idea. I'm going to put though in here. I don't think it's necessary, but maybe it'll help with flow. It was Ricky who said, run. Dallas seemed not to understand the word at first, but then he cut sideways through the thorns, tearing himself open as he fled into the wilderness. Maybe into the wilderness such as it was. All right. Hey, Mr. Wilburn, your beard is looking amazing. Thank you, Springbok. Glad to have you here. Maybe it was fresh. Maybe it was the fresh blood. Maybe it was starting the chase again. Wolves could probably smell fear. Geordie thought he'd heard that somewhere. Been told it his whole life, in fact. All the wolves ran after Dallas. Dallas, Geordie bolted for the trap door and the ladder nailed into the tree leading down below. Ricky got hands on him first, but Geordie still tried to get away from the larger boy. Clyde joined in, and together they wrestled him to the floorboards with creaks and screeches from the movement of the boards against the tenpenny nails. I have to help him. You'll just get yourself killed. Clyde's voice was deep to start with, but broke and went high and squeaky like the old days on the last two words. Emery said something from the window, but they couldn't hear it over Dallas's screams and their own struggles. The other three boys stood. What happened? What is it? Geordie ran up beside Emery. Emery repeated it, even though Geordie could now see for himself. They got him. 4 wolves tore into their friend on the ground and the deep piles of leaves off the trail. They gnawed and whipped their heads back and forth as they splattered his blood on the surrounding growth, while tearing away meaty shreds of their friend. Sorry if that's too graphic for anybody. It's just watching us, Ricky said. Dallas was still screaming. The cries were only just beginning to descend into whimpering, gagging whines. Why wasn't anyone coming to help? Someone around the populated edges of this patch of woods had to hear this. Is this how they always sounded when they played out here? Geordie's mother had made a comment about how crazy they got out in the woods, that she could hear even from the backyard. God, he wished he was standing there now, running for the porch door instead of this lonely tree. Instead of in this lonely tree, because he's not running for the tree, so I need to be clear where he is. Geordie thought he misunderstood. Geordie thought he misunderstood the words Ricky said. He was sure he was in shock, but then he saw it too. The red wolf, instead of joining the others, had sat in the middle of the trail on its broad haunches and stared up at the boys trapped above. The wolf did not pant as it guarded them, but did lick its tongue out over its nose and continued to stare up. Geordie had the feeling this wolf was mostly watching him. Emery said, "It's keeping an eye on us for the others." Clyde shook his head. "No, they don't think like that. Maybe after they're done with, maybe they'll leave us alone." Geordie stepped away from the window. His stomach tightened and threatened to evacuate. He held it off as he rummaged through the junk they had in the corners and on the shelves. Let's say of this raised space. "I'm not going back down there for nothing," Ricky said. "You going to live up here?" Clyde asked. God, they're still tearing into him. Oh, God. Emery bowed at the waist and rested his dirty, sweaty forehead on the rough edge of the plywood hole. That couldn't be comfortable, but maybe that helped him focus on something besides his friend's death cries. He's still screaming. Oh, we should have done something. He's our friend. They're killing our friend. I want my parents. I don't want to be here anymore. Geordie knocked several items off a board shelf and continued rummaging. "Nothing to do," Ricky said. They'd have killed us too. As if on cue, Dallas fell silent. That just made it easier to hear the tearing and chewing. Geordie wondered if wolves actually chewed or just swallowed the chunks whole. He pushed the thought from his mind as best he could and continued to gather things. Let me say, this felt like a question he should know the answer to. He had seen dogs eat, hadn't he? He pushed the thought from his mind as best he could and continued to gather things. Clyde's voice shook and broke as he spoke. "We have to get out of here sometime. Now might be the best time with only one wolf to deal with." "Are you kidding?" Ricky asked. Emery moaned and said, "They killed Dallas. He's dead. They killed him." I'm going to add one more thing here. He's really dead. Emery's the one that's kind of expressing the shock that kids would actually feel in a situation like that. So I'm trying to have that kind of spill out of him hopefully without overdoing it. We can't stay up here forever. I can stay up here until someone comes looking for us, Ricky said. So you want your dad, your mom, or your brother to come out here with the wolves waiting for them? Clyde asked. You want my folks to come out here and get killed too? Ricky couldn't come up with the rest of that sentence. Someone with a gun needs to come, I guess. Clyde shook his head. If we wait until someone comes looking, someone who cares about us, Dallas won't be the only one who... Geordie muscled his way back between his friends. Emery got a splinter in his forehead before he raised it away from the plywood edge. Geordie threw something out before the others saw what he had. The baseball sailed out just to the left of the red wolf's head and bounced along the trail. The ball was dirty and spotted to the point of almost being black. The red stitching had faded and frayed. The ball wobbled as it finished rolling, having lost the integrity of its shape long before it became a fixture in their treehouse collection of junk. From under its skin, the lighter webbing of the ball's filler was starting to show through, giving it a rough texture. Geordie comforted himself by thinking if the ball had still been round, he would have hit his target. Whether it was true or not, it gave him courage to try again. The red wolf looked behind itself at the ball a few feet away and then back up at the boys trapped above. Were you trying to get it to play fetch? Clyde asked. Geordie threw the next object without answering. Its harder, sharper corners twirled off-center through the air in a quick falling arc. The wolf stood and shuffled backward as if sensing something was different this time. It ducked its head and started to turn just before the sandy brick bounced off the animal's furry neck with a dull thud. The animal yelped in a way that might have derived sympathy under other circumstances. It backed off a few feet, but then lowered its massive snout to the trail and showed its teeth with a deep growl. All right, need to put an L on the end of growl. With a deep growl from its throat that filled the air between the pines and oaks. Any doubt that this large creature was any sort of ordinary dog was dispelled in that moment. That brick had come from new construction in a neighborhood cul-de-sac toward the west, where the sun was gradually dipping down into the trees. They had wanted to bring more to the treehouse, but had been chased off a few days earlier, chased off by the construction workers, not the wolves. Who knew then how useful a pile of bricks might have been this day? Excuse me. Geordie lifted up a broken snow globe that they had found buried in the pine straw a long time ago. It was an early addition to their strange collection of junk and treasures. A couple plastic snowmen and a Santa bounced around in the waterless sphere. In the waterless, let's say, half sphere. No, let's say dome. The waterless dome. The other boys grabbed up objects from Geordie's collection of trash as well. They then hesitated as the other wolves, with blood still fresh upon their jowls, circled back onto the trail. The entire pack edged away from the treehouse, but kept their haunted eyes forward and up at what threat the boys could offer. Should we keep throwing at them? Emery asked, with his voice shaking and a smooth rock in his grasp. They might be out of range now, Ricky said. Hell, I can throw that far. Clyde tested his own rock by bouncing it in his hand. Tested the weight of his own rock by bouncing it in his hand. Unless you think you can bash their heads open, I'm not sure we can save ourselves here by throwing at them, Ricky said. The boys stood staring and considered the predators that had them pinned in place. Blood actually dripped from the snouts of the wolves, who had been colors other than red before they all set upon Dallas. Geordie swore he could see the gristle between their fangs from his friend's insides. This was life and death, and he was really starting to believe death wasn't over. The death wasn't over. Geordie threw the snow globe. He tried for the naturally red wolf again. Perhaps he should have gone for one of the other wolves. Just a moment, I'm sorry. Perhaps he should have gone for one of the other wolves. others because his wolf was ready. Sorry. It danced backward and to the side. The dry snow globe thumped on the trail and broke open, scattering its pieces, but not shattering the curved piece of glass. He probably would have missed anyway, but the animal was taking no chances. The other boys threw as well. The other wolves made to dodge, but at least two of them let out yelps after taking hits. Geordie kept his eyes locked upon the red wolf, who glared back at him. His friends rearmed for another volley, but things started to change. The wolves, one by one, rose up onto their back haunches. Their upper bodies swelled out, and their shapes morphed to allow them to better stand. "What's happening?" Emery asked, lowering his throwing rock back down by his side. "This can't be real," Ricky said. Clyde added his own comment, but whatever it was got lost in a choking cough. The wolves launched themselves forward, running on two legs and pumping their arms as they charged. A few vanished below the treehouse, and their claws scraped against the bark of the tree. Those scratching sounds climbed upward and drew closer. The red wolf sprung from the ground and tried to claw its way up the side of the wall. Wood peeled away. The window broke open wider. That should be one paragraph. Sorry. I don't know why I broke that paragraph. The window broke open wider. Emery tried to slam their makeshift shutter closed, but one of the hinges popped loose and it hung askew. Bark and the rungs of their ladder peeled and broke away from their tree. Under them, let's say. Geordie dared to look over the side, down into the red monster's face as its bulging arms clawed away more of the front wall. The beast held on to one of the supporting branches jutting out from under the base of the treehouse as it reached with the other paw for another handhold. Geordie lifted his rock into view and took aim on the monster's face. The creature decided to let loose and drop back to the ground this time. Geordie dared to lean out, still meaning to brain the mutated wolf thing. The trap door. That's one word, isn't it? Yeah, I'm going to need to fix that all the way through the story. The trap door bounced up behind him once and then a second time. The third time it flung completely open, and the black, furry head of another monster squeezed through. It pivoted around the opening, growling and slobbering Dallas's blood onto the floorboards. Its eyes seemed to finally fix upon Emery and even tracked him as the boy shuffled around the edges of the structure, looking for any path of escape, though there was none. It tried to squeeze through, but was too big. Then it clawed into the tree trunk and thrust itself upward, separating the boards around the opening. Geordie turned and threw with all his might. The rock struck the monster's eye socket and bounced back toward him. Blood painted over its yellow eye, and the wolf howled, but kept fighting its way in. Geordie went for his rock, but got too close, and the animal reached with one clawed arm up between the boards at him. It might have gotten him too, but Emery hurled a broken metal lamp that clobbered the beast on the side of the skull. The monster almost seemed to be trying to speak as it garbled out its anger at the offense. It missed Geordie by inches as the boy retrieved the rock, circled around, and started bludgeoning the creature on the back of its furry skull. It tried to twist around to be done with the boy, but then lost its grip and fell back to the ground. Clyde sprung forward and slammed the trapdoor shut, though it no longer fit snugly into its slot. Ricky jumped forward and joined Clyde in holding the door closed. Geordie staggered away and nearly stepped between two of the boards that didn't align in the floor anymore. I guess anymore is one word. Yep. The building Probably build would work, but I think it adds confusion, though. The building had been so perfect before. It was a real shame that they hadn't made it wolf monster proof. I'll make that a hyphenated word. Wolf monster proof. Monster wolf proof? There, let's do it that way. I'll flip it around. Monster wolf proof. I think that works better. The wall in front of them broke into 3 large pieces that fell away with 2 wolves that had made another jump from the ground. The boys stared out into the wide open air and at large monsters on the ground that seemed too close to... No, that's not what I want. That seemed much closer to them than they had before. Another impact from below bounced the trapdoor with Clyde and Ricky parked on top. They gave a grunt. The next strike... I got they instead of these, so that's a typo. The next strike broke the door in 2. Both of them scrambled away as the pieces of the trapdoor fell below. 3 boards around that opening shifted, tilted, and fell off the branches. Let's say the wood. The wood piled up at angles with the sharp points of the twisted and bent nails sticking up. Even with the wolves all around, Geordie imagined himself falling on those nails, and he shivered. "We have to run for it," Geordie said. "We have to." "No way." Emery huddled in one of the surviving corners closest to the tree trunk. "We'll die. They'll kill us for sure." "If we stay up here," Geordie yelled, "they're going to knock the treehouse apart and then take us one." The brown wolf, in its mutated form, was still very bushy as it leapt up into view on the open side of the failing treehouse, where it seized Clyde by his ankle. Clyde's eyes went wide, and he got out the word "please" before he slammed to his face and then jerked backward off the side. Geordie dove and tried to grab his friend by the hands, but Clyde was over the side and gone before Geordie ever landed and bit into his own tongue. Clyde was always the fastest, even now as he fell out of sight. All right. Clyde's voice broke over and over as he screamed in fear and pain upon the ground. The wolves growled as they fell upon him. With the meaty, tearing sounds came the grinding noise of teeth working into and through bones. The boards of the floor shifted again, and Geordie rolled to the side to avoid being dumped down under the tree with them. A few of the boards flipped over and landed nails up as well. Others braced on the tree and formed steep ramps up from the bloody ground. A chasm with a thick branch bridge now separated Geordie from the other 2 surviving boys over on the tree trunk side of the split structure. "What do we do?" Emery screamed. "We have to run for it," Geordie said. "Which way?" Ricky said. "How?" Clyde still screamed and hacked from his back just below them. The black and white wolves scrambled up the tilted boards toward them. Geordie felt for the rock to try to do his best to defend himself, but he realized it was gone. He reached for anything and came up with a dirty, spotted, full-length mirror propped forgotten in one far corner. Wrong pronoun. It came away from the walls with the scratching sound of old breaking cobwebs. Not scratching, it'd be crackling, wouldn't it? The crackling sound of old breaking cobwebs. The entire half of the treehouse hanging out on the ends of the limbs where Geordie was stranded, shifted a few degrees, tilted toward the south. Let me put a comma there. More of the boards broke away as the boys screamed and the pair of wolves tried to climb up with them. 2 of the ramped boards snapped under them and they fell. and the beasts fell. The half treehouse tilted a little more, and trash spilled off the shelves onto the monsters' heads. They howled and ran out from under the tree to join the others around Clyde's body. Geordie thought the boy might still be crying for help, but he couldn't tell. "Go now," Geordie yelled. "We have to." Ricky met eyes with Geordie across the expanse and then jumped down from the edge. He screamed and howled as he skewered his calf and thigh on one line of nails exposed below. The white wolf returned to the scene. It looked up at the last two boys, staring down in shock, and almost seemed to grin in the way wolves did. The upright monster dragged Ricky with the board still nailed to the boy's leg. Let me put an apostrophe there. Out from under the tree to where the other wolves feasted. "Geordie, why is this happening? Why?" He shook his head and said, "Go down the ladder and run. I can't move. You have to. Now is our only chance. If we stay up here, we die for sure." Emery cried without shame as he swung out where the trap door used to be and began climbing down the rungs. Geordie had no idea if they stood a chance, if the wolf monsters were distracted at all, but this was the only play as he saw it. Geordie stepped out onto the thick branch between the halves of their old treehouse to make his way across. Then Emery fell too. Some of the rungs were missing from the wolves trying to climb. He landed hard on his back and gave a heavy grunt, followed by silence from the wind getting knocked out of him. "Emery!" The black wolf lifted its wet snout from the bodies of their other two friends. The red wolf moved as well. Geordie stepped back onto the tiled floor onto the tilted floor on his side of the structure and waved his mirror at them even though they were too far away to hit. It was his fault Emery had tried, and Emery was his last friend left alive. "Hey, up here, come and get me." Geordie let fly every cuss word he knew. He strung them together in a phrasing that made no sense. He was out of his mind with fear and anger. The violation of watching his friends die like this was too much to bear. It was bigger than the fear of dying himself. All right, I need to got an extra punctuation mark there we'll get rid of. He even used the really, really bad curses that would shame his parents if they heard. The wolves looked up at him for whatever reasons might have drawn their attention. Spots of light danced over their faces, and the animals twisted away, trying to cover their eyes with their paws. Geordie was given pause by this, but then tilted the mirror on purpose to dazzle the wolves with the reflected light. "Run, Emery, while you can." Geordie glanced down to his dismay to see Emery curled up on his side, not moving at all. He might have been unconscious or frozen with fear. Either way, Geordie decided he was going down there. He was going to try to help. He was going to be with his friend, however this played out. The red wolf leapt up onto the floor on its hind legs right in front of Geordie. It bent forward, showing its teeth, and arched its back. Geordie swung and shattered the mirror across the beast's head. The monster staggered backward, bleeding dark red into its fur from multiple cuts. This was the most satisfied Geordie had been all day. Then the treehouse broke free of its framing and tilted completely over. The wolf thing disappeared from Geordie's sight. The world spun as everything moved faster than he could track or register. He fell away into space and then tumbled down a couple tilted boards. He rolled out onto the hard ground, stopping inches short of catching his eye on the ends of some bent nails. The falling treehouse continued to crash and break apart all around him. Debris flew everywhere, and Geordie waited to be crushed out of existence. Pieces of wood struck his back through his shirt, but he went on living. That left the deadly wolf monsters that he could still hear growling and howling over all the commotion. He needed to get moving if he wanted a chance at living. He rolled to his side, taking care to avoid the nails around him. Emery was down here somewhere, closer to the tree, but Geordie couldn't locate him. The wolves were close. They either had him or they didn't. Soon they would have Geordie too. Geordie wobbled to his feet, but couldn't seem to get moving. It was like he had forgotten how to run. Go, he ordered himself. Go, go. Finally, his legs obeyed. He charged through the debris field, out from under the tree, and through the woods in a random direction. He wanted to run home. Even if he didn't make it, he wanted to go home. It was all he wanted in the world. He expected to spear his foot on some upturned nails. It seemed unavoidable, but he managed to run out ahead of the broken treehouse and kept going as he heaved for breath. They were behind him. He heard them. He felt them coming for him, the last of his friend group. He knew that turning around to see what was behind him made you run slower, not to mention that he might run right into a tree at the worst possible moment, but he couldn't help himself. He braced himself to see the ravaged bodies of his friends. Instead, he saw Emery running. The boy was going in a different direction, diagonally away from Geordie's path. At least he was up and running. Maybe going two different directions gave them a better chance at survival, at least for one of them, maybe. Then he saw the black wolf on all fours again, chasing after Emery. It was coming up on him fast. It was like watching Dallas get run down all over again. Then he spied the red wolf, still on its back legs, coming for him. Geordie faced forward and ran for all he was worth, weaving between the trees and ducking through smaller openings in lower branches and spreading thickets. The wolf cried as it ripped through those spaces too, seemingly right behind him. Geordie was running out of energy. He stared into the muted glare of the setting sun between the trees. He was running west, the wrong direction, but no other choice left to him now. Long after he expected to be snagged by a dark claw and torn apart by long fangs, he emerged from the trees into the construction of a partially completed house. Much of the brickwork had been completed, but large piles of the rusty, sandy bricks remained. The windows and doors had not been installed yet, so he could get inside, but so could the monster chasing him. Geordie left footprints in a scattering of sand over the grassless yard as he cried out for help. The site was silent and deserted, though. No nail guns, no music from a radio, no voices, and no hammers. He was alone with the empty echoes of his own voice. He grabbed up 2 bricks as he sprinted. Let me get the tense right on this. As he sprinted for the doorway to what would be the basement or maybe a lower-level utility room. He spun about in time to see the red wolf coming up right behind him in its full mutated monster form. Geordie showed his own teeth as he swung first one brick and then the other, both clutched in his fists. He connected with the end of the monster's black nose and then crunched its paw where it held the edge of the doorway they both occupied. The beast staggered backward and away. As it clawed its own face, the creature began to shrink. Its full wolf form was still quite large, but still something less than the monster. Now I'm going to take out this second still. I don't think that helps anything. But something less than the monster that could stand on its back legs. Just emerging from the trees, still upright were the gray and bushy brown wolves. Despite towering over him, their tongues still lolled out of the... Despite towering over them, their tongues... I don't know what despite has to do with that, so let's take that out. Towering over him, their tongues lolled out. Boy, I fell in love with the word still, didn't I? Lolled out of the side of their rows of teeth. He thought of these 2 creatures as Dallas's and Clyde's wolves. His friends were dead, and their blood painted these beasts' fur. Alright, Geordie let fly with one brick and then the other. They both connected with the monster's head and staggered them backward. Both creatures started to diminish into their true wolf forms too. Geordie considered his options. Everything in him wanted to retreat into the house and find a place to hide. The wolves would still be here, though. This was just one more house that provided a false sense of security, much like their destroyed treehouse did. The house of sticks had not held up. This house of bricks likely would not serve as well as the children's fables made it sound like it would. He stalked out past his red wolf, still transforming. He took up more bricks from the pallet out in the exposed yard and threw them one after the other. The gray and brown wolves took multiple hits and bounded away into the shadows of the forest. Geordie turned in time to see the full red wolf staring at him. He climbed up onto the pile of bricks as the wolf held its ground. As the boy raised a brick in each hand, the wolf lowered its snout to the ground. To the, let's say, sandy lot. It's a little more specific. Keeps me from using the word ground again. Showing his teeth, Geordie said, "This is for Emery." A brick bounced off the wolf's hip and it shuffled to the side. Emery might still be alive, but Geordie wasn't sure. He let fly again. "This is for Dallas." The wolf tried to maneuver away, but took a heavy blow to the middle of its back. As Geordie lifted two more bricks, the animal bolted for the woods. Geordie called his other friends' names and aimed for the creature's head, but he missed as it disappeared. He sat with bricks. He sat with new bricks in each hand for a long time. His arms and shoulders grew tired and shaky, but he was afraid. He was afraid to put them down. Darkness was closing in, though. He was afraid to move. Very good. "Go," he said to himself. "Go, go." He leapt off the pile and ran for the street. Gasping for breath on the curb, he looked in dismay at the new construction with no one moved in to any of the houses yet. No help here. Unable to run any longer, Geordie paced down the center of the new street toward the main road. Eventually he dropped one brick and then the other. It wasn't really a decision. He just couldn't seem to hold them any longer. He knew he should walk along the side of the road, but he chose to stay in the center of the street, even with the darkness closing, as he turned for home. Headlights spilled over him, and Geordie waved his arms to be seen, but he made no move to get to the side. No way was he approaching those woods ever again. First the driver laid down on his brakes. The scream of rubber against the road sounded too much like the death cries of his friends. Then the driver employed the horn, and it reminded Geordie of Hal's, causing him to shake all over. The guy jumped from behind the wheel and cursed Geordie. I don't know what I'm trying to say. And cursed Geordie. I don't know what words I was trying to say there. "I need help," the man kept yelling. "My friends are dead. Please help me." The man continued to berate the boy in his path as more cars rolled to a stop, coming from both directions. Geordie covered his ears with both hands and screamed, "Shut the hell up and help me. They're dead. My friends were killed. Please help me." The adults gathered, and the man finally stopped chewing Geordie out. I'll say the other adults. The other adults gathered, and the man stopped chewing Geordie out. Motion drew his attention off the road. He spied 4 wolves among the trees where they sat and watched him. It was getting dark, but he recognized the gray, white, bushy brown wolves. Of course, the red wolf was there too. The black wolf, the one that had been chasing Emery, put a comma there too, was nowhere to be seen. That was probably a bad sign. Geordie refused to get into any of their cars. You never knew who might be a wolf underneath their hopeful face. Helpful faces. All right, we'll capitalize the B here. But he made them call the police and then call his parents as he stood in the middle of the road among the lights of the gathering cars. He didn't feel safe here. He wasn't sure he would feel safe at home either. It was just another pile of sticks. Especially if what he thought he saw today was true. I think I may need to split this off. Make this another paragraph there. All right. Now we're good. He would not let anyone touch or move him to the side of the road, even long after the wolves had retreated into the woods again.